Stop everything and internalize this cold, structural reality. The most painful realization a man can face is that his competence is currently disposable and his character is forgettable. You have been conditioned to believe that competence and kindness are self-evident assets. This is the crisis of disposable value. You work harder, you are more ethical, and you possess a deeper intellectual capacity. Yet you watch men of inferior intellect command greater influence and secure advantages you deserved. Why? Because your value is based on sentiment, and their power is based on structural necessity. You are overlooked not because you lack quality, but because your quality is easily replaced. Your vulnerability is the silent hope that someone will finally recognize your inherent worth. The modern transactional world simply does not operate on hope or inherent worth. It operates on leverage and cost. You must stop betting your entire future on the fragile hope of being seen and start engineering the unshakable reality of being needed. 5 centuries ago, Niccolo Machiavelli meticulously decoded the hidden, brutal arithmetic of influence. He understood that the only security a person can ever possess is what they enforce. He knew that the human mind is a system designed to maximize its own security, not to dispense fairness. This is the ultimate lesson in value construction. It is time to abandon the lie of sentimental affection and embrace the ironclad security of utility. Machiavelli, with his cold strategic clarity, provided the ultimate measure of this reality. Men sooner forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony. This statement is profoundly strategic. It teaches that deep emotional ties are quickly superseded by the immediate, tangible reality of material security and resources. Your goal is to eliminate any structure in your life that relies solely on the fragility of human sentiment. You must be perceived, psychologically and structurally, as the patrimony. You must become a resource so essential, so valuable, and so costly to lose that people are compelled to protect your presence simply out of self-interest. This is the ruthless art of becoming dangerously valuable. This video is the blueprint for constructing that structural strength, transforming you from an overlooked entity into an utterly unforgettable force. We will not be discussing temporary confidence or cheap psychological tricks. We will be executing the 6 laws of dangerously constructed value, a systematic, philosophical roadmap to achieve indispensability. Are you prepared to abandon the delusion of sentimental value and build a fortress of self-sovereignty that no one can afford to challenge? Then declare your commitment in the comments now and seal your mind against the failure of naivety. Drop this declaration below. I refuse to be disposable. My value is a weapon. Let the architecture of your new reality commence. The first, most critical law of constructing dangerous value is this: you must surgically control your visibility. For the colossal, fatal delusion most people harbor is the belief that universal availability and perpetual presence automatically translate into importance. They are profoundly mistaken. Value is a direct function of scarcity. The human mind, operating on fundamental psychological mechanisms, instantly devalues what is common, constant, and easily obtained. Your goal is to transform yourself from a readily available asset into a prized, high-demand commodity. The individual who is always present at every gathering, instantly replies to every message, and has an entirely open schedule is broadcasting a single, unmistakable message to the social and professional marketplace: my time is cheap and my priorities are low. This consistent overexposure makes you predictable and ordinary. It teaches your environment that you can be taken for granted. Once contempt is bred, respect is fundamentally impossible, and your psychological leverage is forfeit. Your continuous, full presence is not a virtue. It is a critical strategic vulnerability. Strong men understand the devastating silent power of strategic absence. Machiavelli, with his cold strategic clarity, warned against the peril of overexposure. He stated, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand." This is the core psychological mechanism. What they see constantly, they devalue. Conversely, when your presence is meticulously and selectively deployed, you instantly become valuable, sought after, and your influence holds measurable weight. The wise strategist refuses to allow his presence to become a constant, common commodity. Your strategic mandate is to learn to withdraw strategically to command demand. You must make your absence an active, communicative tool. By creating an intentional lack of you compel others to initiate the next contact and makes them want more of you, not less. You are forcing the world to recognize your worth by temporarily denying them access to it. To enforce the principle of asymmetrical scarcity, you must implement these three interlocking systems, turning your availability into a precise, high-leverage weapon. System 1. The calculated delay. The weak man is compelled by the urge to respond instantly to all stimuli. This sets a fatal expectation of instant availability. The strategist, however, understands that speed is only valuable when tied to urgency. For all non-critical communication, emails, non-urgent texts, social inquiries, you must impose a calculated delay. The strategist replies only after a calculated delay of several hours, often outside the typical workday. This is not rudeness. This strategically teaches the recipient that your time is a finite, valuable resource. It simultaneously increases the weight of your eventual response. You are effectively training your environment to respect your schedule and prioritize their next message to you. Your focus is a precious resource, and by rationing your attention, you compel others to value it. You must eliminate the pattern of being reliably available. System 2. The exit on the high note. Never wait until the energy has peaked and conversation stalls. The common individual hangs around, enjoying the lingering validation until the moment of diminishing returns. The strategist, operating on the principle of maximum psychological impact, leaves the gathering while the engagement is still high, or ends a conversation while the other party still has questions. This creates a powerful psychological deficit, a vacuum of your presence, that compels people to initiate the next contact and makes them want more of you. You leave them with a strong, lingering, positive impression. This technique forces others to invest their own energy and desire in securing your company again, rather than simply expecting your next inevitable appearance. You are training the world to pursue you. System 3. Hoard your knowledge. Your highest value is not in your labor, but in your proprietary knowledge, the blueprint. The weak man shares his processes and methodology openly, confusing transparency with value, thus making himself easily replaceable. The strategist understands that while the outcome must be delivered, the core system and its updates must remain a tightly controlled strategic asset. You must ensure that the most complex database, the most proprietary workflow, or the master integration blueprint remains solely under your custodian. You become the essential gatekeeper. This forces compliance through necessity rather than affection. By limiting access strictly on a need-to-know basis, you reinforce the structural reality that your presence is a non-negotiable requirement for their success. Consider two marketing consultants, Alex, the predictable man, and Victor, the strategist, both pitching for a critical, high-profile project. Alex is desperate. He submits his proposal instantly. He follows up every 12 hours. He replies to the client's ambiguous, non-urgent questions within 5 minutes, even late at night. The client perceives this. Alex is not busy, lacks other options, and is anxious for the work. Result: The client delays responding for 2 weeks, attempting to generate anxiety and force concessions, knowing Alex will lower his price with each desperate follow-up. Alex's universal availability has dramatically lowered his perceived price and given the client maximum psychological leverage. Victor submits his proposal, then executes strategic withdrawal. He halts all communication for a calculated 72 hours. Instead of waiting anxiously, he subtly, but visibly, posts high-value updates about a promising public pilot project he just launched with a competitor of the primary client. The strategic result is immediate. The client realizes Victor is not dependent on them. They are compelled to break their own silence and rush back to the table, demonstrating that they are more afraid of your absence and your alternatives than they are of losing the deal. Victor has leveraged his absence to increase his value and compel pursuit. Your ultimate goal is to revoke the privilege of your presence when it is being abused or taken for granted. This is a cold, necessary strategic maneuver that creates immediate leverage. The second law in achieving dangerous value is the construction of structural dependence. The core mistake of the masses is confusing emotional attachment with strategic security. Relying on kindness, friendship, or historical loyalty is a catastrophic structural failure. Why? Because sentiment is transient and collapses instantly under pressure. When you build your alliances on sentimental bonds, you are structurally compromised. The strategist, however, understands that utility is eternal. People will always act to preserve their own resources and success. You must surgically eliminate all reliance on the fragility of affection and instead make yourself so fundamentally indispensable that others are forced into reliability out of necessity. You must treat your alliances not as emotional bonds, but as strategic assets, leveraging systems and contingencies to make yourself immune to betrayal. You are not aiming to be liked. You are aiming to be needed. Machiavelli defined the immutable necessity of this strength. The chief foundations of all states are good laws and good arms, and you cannot have good laws where you do not have good arms. This axiom provides the core blueprint for your strategic relationships. Your alliances must be built on good laws and on good arms. For the modern strategist, this means two things. First, your power must be protected by enforceable systems. Second, your leverage must be built upon the structural, economic, and strategic reliance your network has on you. Your fortress is built not on trust, but on the unassailable utility you provide, making your continued presence a non-negotiable requirement for their success. You must reject the emotional expectation that your kindness should guarantee their loyalty. Your kindness is a factor, but their self-interest is the determinant. By assuming self-interest as the baseline for all human interaction, you eliminate the possibility of shock and disappointment, replacing them with preparedness and foresight. To build true structural dependence, you need to systematically shift from simply being useful to becoming irreplaceable. Pillar 1. Control the choke point. Position yourself as the essential connector or information hub. This is the strategic choke point. All vital resources, intelligence, or opportunities to your allies must flow through you. By maintaining control over the core system and limiting access strictly on a need-to-know basis, you transform into the gatekeeper. If you are the single central node, the failure of the entire system is linked to your departure, compelling others to maintain your presence through necessity. Pillar 2. Asymmetrical skill stacking. Hoard asymmetrical skills by developing rare, high-value abilities that are tedious, time-consuming, or hard for others nearby to replicate. Your value is compounded when you possess a unique combination of competencies. This increases your replacement cost exponentially. When your replacement cost is high, your leverage becomes absolute. This is the most honest form of strategic dominance. Pillar 3. The failure point clarification. You must manage the failure point. Make sure your allies realize that your absence would cause catastrophic failure in their plans. You must ensure they understand the implied ruin that would follow your departure. This secures their loyalty through the perceived cost of loss rather than the hope of gain. Their reliability becomes a functional, systemic reality. Consider a high-stakes, complex project involving two founders, Mark, the naive man, and Stephen, the strategist. Mark relies entirely on a verbal agreement and mutual goodwill. He shares all system access and documentation openly, trusting that the allies' friendship will protect the information. When the ally, facing better external opportunities, leaves abruptly, they take important proprietary knowledge with them, destabilizing the entire project. Mark is left exposed, paralyzed by the sense of emotional and moral betrayal. He placed his trust in the fragility of sentiment. Stephen accepts the alliance but operates from the premise of self-interest. He deliberately positions himself as the sole custodian and integrator of the most complex database, the core system. He limits access strictly on a need-to-know basis and maintains control over the master integration blueprint. Crucially, Stephen signs a detailed operating agreement which sets specific performance milestones and includes a non-compete clause that penalizes early exit. The result is that if the ally leaves, the workflow collapses and their investment instantly loses value. Stephen protected his interests not through goodwill, but through the allies' predictable adherence to self-preservation. He placed his trust in the ironclad security of strategic leverage. By building structural dependence, you transform the psychological dynamic of your relationships. You eliminate the emotional risk of sentimental trust and replace it with a fortress of indispensability that no one can afford to challenge. The third strategic pillar in constructing dangerous value is the cultivation of unbreakable self-sovereignty. This is the highest form of personal power, the absolute internal posture that your choices, your value, and your priorities are non-negotiable and not subject to external review. The moment you offer a torrent of unnecessary details or explanations for your choices, you transform your autonomy into a public negotiation. You are committing a verbal leakage that signals low self-sovereignty. The compulsion to justify, apologize, or over-explain is a deeply rooted psychological reflex, the inner apology, born from a paralyzing fear of conflict and a desperate desire to control what others think. This reflex is a fatal flaw in power dynamics. Every minute you spend justifying your decision to a client, a colleague, or a friend is a minute you are teaching them that your position is fragile and subject to their approval. You must purge this weakness. Justification transforms a declarative statement into a fragile request for approval. Machiavelli understood that the illusion of control begins with the appearance of absolute non-negotiable certainty. He articulated this essential reality. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This statement is your blueprint. You cannot afford to have your external appearance, your communication style, contradict the internal reality of your self-sovereignty. A torrent of justification is perceived by the majority as a visible signal of internal weakness and a desperate need for external approval. By eliminating this verbal leakage, you project an unshakable inner certainty that forces others to respect your choices, even if they don't understand them. Your certainty must be based on clear, unyielding internal logic, making your actions predictable and therefore respected, not debated. You are not seeking affection, you are asserting authority. To execute and enforce this principle of unbreakable self-sovereignty, You must strictly implement these 3 protocols, making your autonomy a fact of the environment, not a topic for discussion. Protocol 1. Purge the apology, reflex, and minimizing language. Eliminate all forms of minimizing, tentative, or defensive language. Stop using phrases like, "I just think," "maybe," "I'm sorry, but," or "does that make sense?" These words are verbal apologies for taking up space. You must replace the language of tentative suggestion with declarative finality. Instead of, "I think we should do X," state, "The decision is X. Proceed accordingly." Never apologize for making a choice that affects no one but yourself. The boundary is a statement of reality, not a request for forgiveness. Protocol 2. Minimum viable answer. The act of oversharing, revealing detailed plans, vulnerabilities, or personal drama is equally destructive. It provides an adversary with unnecessary intelligence and emotional leverage. Your private life, your fears, and your next moves are classified strategic assets. When asked probing, unnecessary questions, you must enforce the minimum viable answer. Practice the 2-sentence rule. State the essential fact, and then immediately pivot the conversation back to a neutral, high-value topic. For example, to an overly intrusive question about your career shift, simply state, "My focus shifted to aligning with my long-term financial goals." Let's move to the agenda for today's meeting. Deny the adversary the ammunition they seek. Protocol 3. The silent boundary. This is the strategic act of setting a non-negotiable boundary and enforcing it without ever explaining the why. You must forbid your adversaries from debating your priorities. When you need to leave, simply state, "I must go. I will connect next week." Do not explain the why. The explanation invites the adversary to debate your priorities and negotiate your time. The silent boundary communicates that your internal logic is sound and non-negotiable. By consistently deploying the autonomy signal, you train your environment that your choices are based on an unchallengeable internal logic, not on fragile emotions seeking approval. Consider a scenario where an unprepared entrepreneur, the naive man, and a strategist, the sovereign man, are presenting their high-value service to a prospective client. The client questions the price, asking, "Why is this so expensive? Can you walk me through every line item?" The naive man immediately becomes defensive, starts apologizing for the cost, and offers a torrent of over-justification and technical detail to win the client's approval. The client senses the underlying neediness and immediately pushes for a 30% discount, knowing the man will concede to escape the terrifying vacuum of failure. The entrepreneur transformed his value into a public negotiation and lost. The client questions the price. The sovereign man maintains an unreadable level gaze and responds with declarative finality. "I appreciate the question. That price is firm, as it reflects the cost of absolute certainty and guaranteed delivery. We can proceed with those terms, or we can look at reducing the scope of work." He then executes a strategic silence. The client senses the complete absence of desperation, realizes the price is a fact, not a request, and is forced to accept the terms or walk away. The strategist remains sovereign because he is not beholden to the client's yes or no. By eliminating the need for external validation, you cease being a pawn reacting to their moves and start becoming the sovereign player who dictates the terms of engagement. This is the visible sign of your commitment to self-sovereignty. The 4th law in achieving dangerous value is the implementation of the betrayal calculus. Naivety means you operate on sentiment, only reacting when trust is already destroyed. The inevitable result is shock, paralysis, and loss. The strategist, however, operates on objective metrics, viewing relationships as contingent strategic assets. You must surgically calculate the probability of betrayal before it occurs, turning prediction into your ultimate defense. You must eliminate the paralyzing possibility of surprise. You must internalize the truth that all human loyalty has a price. It is a transaction, not an emotional bond. The value of an alliance is the sum of the risk of betrayal minus the strength of the counter-leverage. The cost of loyalty is the effort, time, or self-control needed to stay committed to you. The reward of self-interest is the external benefit they could gain by betraying you. When the perceived rewards of self-interest surpass the costs of loyalty, betrayal becomes structurally inevitable. Your strategic duty is to ensure the cost of loyalty remains exponentially lower than the temptation of the reward of self-interest. Machiavelli defined the ruthless necessity of constant vigilance. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. This is a mandate for dual competency. You must possess the cunning of the fox to recognize the traps, the subtle, escalating behavioral signals that indicate a willingness to compromise the alliance. Simultaneously, you must possess the strength of the lion to enforce your boundaries and act decisively when the data confirms a threat. This defense is not a desperate reaction. It is the proactive control of the outcome. You are not waiting for failure. You are anticipating it and installing the counter-levers to make it ruinously expensive for the adversary to execute. Betrayal rarely strikes without warning. It typically escalates through predictable, measurable stages that you must learn to identify as immediate strategic threats. These are the 3 behavioral red flags that indicate the betrayal clock is running. Red flag 1, asymmetrical effort. This is the initial, low-cost phase of psychological exploitation. The individual begins to consistently take more than they give. Chronic time wasting, emotional over-reliance, or minor imbalances in shared workload. They are testing your boundaries to see what you will tolerate. If you accept this imbalance without consequence, they receive the silent signal that your resources are cheap and your limits are non-existent. Actionable signal. Watch for asymmetrical effort. If you are consistently investing 80% of the energy, the betrayal clock is running. This ally is pricing you as a guaranteed, low-cost asset. Red flag 2, the value minimization. The individual begins to subtly devalue your worth. They stop celebrating your wins, they minimize your contributions in public, or they engage in low-grade, constant criticism. This is a psychological maneuver to justify their future action. They must convince themselves you are not worthy of their loyalty before they break it. They are creating a negative narrative about you in their own mind to rationalize their self-interested move. Actionable signal. Listen for shifted language. If compliments dry up or shift to focusing only on your weaknesses, they are mentally preparing for severance. Red flag 3, the information block. This is the final stage before betrayal. They suddenly become vague, non-committal, or cease sharing crucial information with you. They pull back contact without a clear, objective reason, as they are now operating on a separate, hidden strategic track. They are structurally separating your fates so their impending action does not compromise them. Actionable signal. Note abrupt communication gaps. They are no longer transparent because you are now a potential liability to their hidden agenda. This demands an immediate defensive countermove on your part. Consider a co-founder alliance in a promising early-stage tech venture. The strategist must execute the betrayal calculus to avoid catastrophic loss. The naive partner sees the early success and relaxes, relying on verbal promises and shared history. He ignores red flag 1 and red flag 2. When the co-founder receives a better, higher-paying external offer, the reward of self-interest, he walks away, taking the client list and proprietary workflows with him. The naive partner is shocked, paralyzed, and the venture collapses. The strategist recognizes the 3 red flags and does not confront the co-founder immediately. Instead, he executes a calculated defense. He swiftly and silently updates the operating agreement to tighten IAP ownership and implements strict private accountability measures, making sure all critical communication is documented. He identifies the co-founder's external offer and realizes the temptation is too high. He then implements a pre-signed exit clause that makes the cost of departing ruinous. When the co-founder later tries to execute the betrayal, they discover their access is legally blocked, and the cost of the non-compete clause makes the external offer unprofitable. The strategist transformed passive shock into proactive control. By embracing the betrayal calculus, you eliminate the emotional toll of being surprised. You gain the power of accurate prediction, allowing you to build alliances based on structural stability rather than the volatile fragility of human emotion. You are never a victim of the fragile and predictable nature of human commitment. The 5th law in constructing dangerous value demands a strategic reevaluation of failure. The weak fear failure and seek perfect, unblemished execution, believing that any mistake automatically invalidates their competence. This cult of perfection is not a strength, it is a paralyzing liability. It makes the individual predictable, risk-averse, and slow to adapt. Because they fear the internal and external cost of failure, they choose inaction over necessary risk. The truth is that fear of failure is a psychological tax that slows your advancement and grants your competitors the advantage of speed. The individual who is paralyzed by the pursuit of perfection eventually gets outpaced by the strategist who executes quickly, fails small, and ruthlessly extracts data from the setback. You must discard the naive belief that success means avoiding mistakes. Success is achieved by mastering the non-emotional process of using failure as a high-value data point that increases your strength and unpredictability. Machiavelli understood that the strategist must deal with the world as it is, not as they wish it to be. He cautioned against prioritizing fantasy over reality. He who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation. This is the ultimate mandate on failure. You must stop chasing the perfect theoretical plan and instead ruthlessly confront and adjust to what is happening now. The strategist understands that controlled, non-fatal failure is not a personal indictment. It is a system diagnosis. The strategic question is not, "Why did this happen to me?" but, "What tactical advantage can I extract from this failure right now?" Your value increases not when you avoid falling, but when you demonstrate the speed and composure with which you rise. To execute this law, you must consciously deploy failure as a tool for accelerated growth and psychological armor. Form 1. Failure as desensitization. You must actively seek out and endure minor, calculated rejections and setbacks, small, non-fatal failures, to inoculate yourself against the fear of catastrophic loss. This is the only way to build calloused psychological armor. The weak man avoids all critique. The strategist seeks it, asking, "What is the single most critical, painful truth I need to hear about this project?" By deliberately exposing yourself to the sting of minor failure, you condition your nervous system to remain calm when the pressure truly spikes. This practice transforms fear from a paralyzing emotion into a neutral source of energy. Form 2. Failure as information extraction. The common man allows emotional pain to overwhelm him, turning a business setback into a personal disaster. The strategist maintains clinical detachment. You must enforce the rule that every loss, setback, or mistake is immediately reframed not as a personal judgment, but as a system diagnosis. You extract maximum objective data. What was the input? What was the process? And where was the non-linear inflection point that caused the collapse? This focus on measurable variables allows you to learn faster than your competitor, who is still paralyzed by shame and emotion. The failure ceases to be a setback and becomes a strategically guarded, unique piece of market intelligence. Form 3. Failure as unpredictability. The market expects an individual who suffers a major setback to collapse, apologize, and retreat. When you absorb a significant failure without emotional collapse, you signal immense internal resilience, making you a dangerous, unpredictable opponent. This is the resilience signal. If your enemies watch you take a major hit and calmly announce your immediate, revised Plan B, they realize you cannot be easily quantified or contained. Your ability to maintain composure during self-acknowledged crisis demonstrates a profound inner architecture, increasing the psychological cost of future engagement. Consider a high-stakes scenario involving two entrepreneurs, David, the perfectionist, and Clara, the strategist, after a shared client product launch fails spectacularly. David is consumed by shame. He instantly sends a torrent of apologies to the client, explaining every technical detail of the failure and offering steep, unprompted discounts. His defensive panic reveals the full depth of his vulnerability and emotional attachment to the outcome. The client senses this weakness and uses it as leverage, demanding an unreasonable, long-term free service guarantee, securing a massive concession out of David's desperation to mitigate shame. Clara maintains an unreadable, level composure. She calls an immediate internal audit meeting and spends 30 minutes ruthlessly extracting the core failure data. She then contacts the client, not with an apology, but with a declarative analysis. The product failed due to an unforeseen supply chain variable, which we have isolated. The cost of this failure is absorbed by us, and here is our revised, accelerated Plan B and an updated timeline. We will not be offering a discount, as the solution now requires higher value resources. Clara turned the failure into a demonstration of control and competence. By presenting the failure as a solved problem rather than a personal defeat, she maintained her high-value image and used the crisis to assert strategic authority. The strategist utilizes every setback as a forge to temper their internal fire. You do not just survive failure. You deploy it as a necessary resource for achieving long-term dominance. The sixth and final law in constructing dangerous value demands that you reject the illusion of immediate power. The masses seek fast, explosive, visible power, the quick win, the sudden viral moment, the instantly gratifying confrontation. This power is transient, volatile, and dangerously transparent, as it creates a long trail of enemies who are waiting for your inevitable collapse. True, unchallengeable value is not built in a moment. It is forged through the cumulative, quiet, and compound strategic advantage acquired over years. The weak are consistently distracted by noise, low-value conflicts, emotional drama, and the pursuit of external validation. They expend finite energy on battles that hold no strategic value, sacrificing the compound gains of silent, systematic effort. They are playing a transactional game of days, while the strategist is executing a systemic campaign of years. You must ruthlessly defend your time and energy from anything that does not contribute to your long-term structural necessity. Machiavelli understood that the constancy of strategic adjustment is the highest form of discipline. A leader must be adaptive, not rigid. He demanded, "Whoever desires constant success must change his conduct with the times." This is the core of the cumulative strategy. True dominance is sustained by the constant, small, strategic adjustments and the unwavering defense of your internal discipline against the shifting tides of the world. The world is a current, and if you are not actively navigating and adjusting, you will be swept away by those who are. Your daily choices, the rejection of low-value invitations, the disciplined study of a hard skill, the quiet investment in leverage, are the silent bricks that build an unchallengeable fortress of value. To ensure your value compounds over time, you must activate and protect these three engines of long-term dominance. Engine 1, the principle of silent investment. Allocate the majority of your energy, say 80%, to activities that compound value and only 20% to visible public performance. The weak focus solely on the 20%, chasing applause. The strategist focuses on the 80%, ensuring that their competence always exceeds their reputation. When your reputation eventually catches up to the true depth of your value, your rise appears sudden, inevitable, and impossible to halt. This is the power of the silent master. Engine 2, the guard against noise. Systematically filter out low-value conflicts, distractions, and emotional drama. Your time and psychological resources are too valuable to be wasted on temporary skirmishes that will be forgotten by the end of the week. If a conflict does not directly threaten your long-term patrimony, you must dismiss it with a calculated, minimal response. The inability to ignore minor slights is a sign of immaturity and wasted resources. By denying others the emotional reward of your engagement, you train them to seek their drama elsewhere, protecting your focus for strategic execution. Engine 3, reputation as a force multiplier. Every single time you successfully execute one of these 6 laws, every time you demonstrate your unshakable composure, enforce a boundary, or absorb a failure without flinching, you don't just win the moment. You create a reputation that fights future battles for you. This reputation becomes a force multiplier. It is the silent, psychological shield that deters adversaries before they even engage. People realize you are too costly to engage, and they approach you with inherent respect, professionalism, and caution. This is when your value ceases to be a negotiation point and becomes an unquestioned fact of your environment. Consider the 10-year career trajectory of 2 mid-level executives, Frank, the immediate player, and Robert, the silent strategist. Frank is focused entirely on visible performance. He chases titles, constantly seeks external validation, and engages in every high-profile office debate. He sacrifices developing rare skills for immediate, loud victories. His quick, visible rise generates intense jealousy and makes him predictable. When the inevitable recession hits and the company needs to cut costs, Frank is seen as an exciting but ultimately replaceable political operative. His power collapses instantly when the external environment changes. Robert executes the principle of silent investment. He quietly obtains 3 asymmetrical certifications, develops 2 automated systems that save the company millions, and consistently avoids high-drama conflicts. He doesn't seek validation. He seeks irreplaceability. When the same recession hits, the C-suite sees Frank as expendable, but they see Robert as the structural necessity, the indispensable node controlling the flow of high-value resources. Robert is not only protected, but he is immediately promoted, as his demonstrated value is now unquestionable. His power is derived from his utility, not his popularity. Your commitment to long-term discipline is what makes your value a force of nature rather than a fleeting transaction. We have surgically dismantled the illusion of disposable value and provided the 6 laws of dangerously constructed value. These are not moral guidelines. They are structural mandates designed to transform your position in the world from a commodity governed by sentiment into a fortress protected by leverage and necessity. Your value is not something to be hoped for. It is something to be engineered. The choice before you now is not between being good or bad. The choice is brutal, yet beautifully simple. Remain a vulnerable, emotional, and disposable pawn, or become a strategic, calculating, and indispensable player who understands the price of every interaction. If you choose not to master the psychological arithmetic of value, someone who has mastered it will seize control of your life. The world is saturated with people who talk about ambition. It is desperately short of people who wield it. Your environment will test your new commitment immediately. Your old weaknesses will attempt to drag you back into the comfort of disposability. You must silence that inner voice and choose the strategic action. The man who has truly mastered this discipline requires no applause. He does not apologize for the space he occupies. He simply asserts his will and lets the structural effectiveness of his outcome serve as his only defense. Make your commitment binding. Drop this final, irreversible affirmation into the comments and solidify your total transformation. Declare your final resolve. My value is structurally enforced. I am indispensable. Like this video to activate the long-term dominance principle in your life. Share it with one other individual who desperately needs to understand that mere competence, devoid of strategic leverage, is simply weakness with a good resume. Subscribe because your final transformation from an overlooked entity to a dangerously valuable force has only just begun. Stop being disposable. Start being a necessity. The choice is yours, but you must choose quickly. Because while you are still deciding whether to become structurally indispensable, dangerous people are already calculating the price of your replacement.